This podcast contains our own personal views not associated with any organisation. Coronial contains descriptions of death inquests that may be graphic and disturbing to some listeners. Discretion is advised. Hi everyone, and welcome back to today's episode of Coronial. My name's Emma.
I'm Georgie.
And I'm Alice.
In today's episode, we're covering the inquest into the death of Ebony Thompson, which occurred on the 2nd of September 2023. She was 22 months old when she died, and the cause of her death was initially recorded as undetermined by the forensic pathologist who performed her autopsy. So part of the coroner's role in this inquest was to see if a determination on the cause of death could be made based on the evidence that was provided throughout the inquest. And this one, I feel like it might be a bit difficult for parents of young children to listen to just because of the nature and context of the death, which we'll obviously get into very shortly. But if you do have toddler-aged children, just consider whether you want to listen to this one, because if it were me in that position, this probably would make me like quite nervous and hyper aware of certain situations that are relevant to the context. So,
and it's like, I have heard feedback though from people that we know as well, where sometimes that's actually helpful in terms of educational for them and they don't mind. And then other times they're like, no, I was squeamish and I didn't enjoy that.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be very dependent on each individual.
And that's it. And we try and do a variety of cases, right, that sort of cater to different people's interests. Not every case is going to be one to listen for everyone. And this one for, parents of young children. I mean, I'd give a listen to the start of the context of the inquest. You'll get an idea pretty quickly of what it's going to be about and whether it's something you'd be interested in listening to. So on the morning of the 31st of August 2023, Ebony was signed into her childcare centre in Humpty Doo in the Northern Territory. And yes, Humpty Doo is a real place.
That's amazing. I love that name.
I want to go there now. Can we take a road trip?
For
podcast purposes?
Absolutely. I remember I used to take people when I lived in Darwin to the Humpty Doo Hotel, because they've got a hotel there and it's got like a big boxing crocodile at the front, like one of those massive like big thing statues. Like right out the front. That's what Humpty Doo is known for, is this big boxing crocodile. So Ebony had been attending this childcare centre at Humpty Doo since the end of June that year, so for about 2 months. And her older siblings had also attended that childcare centre as well. On this day, Ebony was one of 15 children being cared for in the Green Ants room. So the Green Ants room was for children aged 2 to 3 years, but children as young as 18 months could also be placed in that room. So Ebony had moved to the Green Ants room in early August 2023, so earlier that month.
Okay.
So she was a little bit under that age range of 2 to 3, but only by a couple of months.
Yep.
So there were 5 rostered educators in the Green Ants room that day: Miss H, Miss P, Miss K, and Miss U, and Miss M was covering the breaks. All of the rostered staff had childcare qualifications and current first aid certificates. Throughout the morning, Ebony played with her friends and participated in group activities. She was very happy and engaged, and otherwise it was a normal morning. During the morning, the chickens in the chicken coop were very noisy, and some of the children went to investigate what was going on, but they were then moved away by the supervisors.
Okay.
So to piece together Ebony's movements, the coroner relied on CCTV footage, which covered some of the Green Ants playground. There were some blind spots of the CCTV footage though. So the footage showed that between 11:19am and 11:37am, Miss H and Miss P were in the Green Ants playground area with Ebony and the other children, and Miss K was at the chicken coop gate supervising the children. The chicken coop gate, there was a little bit of a blind spot around there. At 11:22am, Miss K recalls seeing Ebony playing in the sandpit, and this was the last recalled sighting of Ebony.
Oh, no.
The last time they could remember actually, like physically, someone seeing her.
And remembering what she was doing at that time. Yeah, okay.
So at 11:28am, Miss K left the playground to get lunch organised. At 11:32 a.m., a head count was conducted by Miss P using a phone application. Not quite sure how that works, but
Typically I use my fingers, but
Calculator app?
it might literally be a tick off name of each individual child or something.
There was an actual app called like Explore Playground or something.
Right, okay.
That they were using. I'm not familiar with what childcare centres use. I know they're a lot more digital than when we were kids.
Yes, that's for sure.
No longer the times where you pick your kid up from school, they have to tell you what they actually did because you already know what they got up to. So yes, that head count was conducted at 11:32 a.m. and Miss P recorded Ebony as being present and accounted for. So I don't think she remembers physically seeing Ebony, but like she was accounted for.
She counted the correct number of people.
Correct.
So therefore,
yeah. So from 11:37 a.m., so 5 minutes later, the lunchtime routine commenced. So each of the educators left the playground with 4 to 5 children each to go wash hands before lunch, and they did that sort of in a tranched manner. Miss H left first, followed by Miss P and then Miss U. No further checks were done on the playground to ensure all children were accounted for, and it is known that Ebony did not leave the playground with the other children, so she didn't go to lunch.
Right.
After hands were washed, the children moved to the veranda for lunch, and at 11:40, Miss H commenced a lunchtime head count and noticed that Ebony was missing.
Okay. So what's the time period between these head counts?
So 11:32 to 11:40.
Okay, so that's actually pretty close
really
together.
quick, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So at 11:41 a.m., the CCTV shows Miss H entering the playground to look for Ebony. It then shows her running towards the island shed. This shed was called the island shed because it had a mural of like an island.
It's not like
with
on an island.
No,
in an island of the childcare or whatever.
No, it's just got like a beach and then an island with a palm tree on it, basically. So that's what they called it, the island shed. And behind the shed was where the chicken coop was. And as I said, this area was not readily covered by the CCTV. Miss H found Ebony at the chicken coop gate at the end of the pathway. She called out to Ebony, but Ebony did not respond. So she ran to Ebony and noticed she was blue and floppy. And so she grabbed her around the belly. Miss H said that Ebony had been standing at the chicken coop fence with her face like towards the chicken yard.
Mm-hmm.
And her head was tilted to the left.
Okay.
So
because she was running towards the shed, so presumably she spotted Ebony and starts running towards it because
and
something doesn't look right.
Yeah.
Well,
and she's also the child is missing.
Yeah.
And she's like, where have you been?
Yeah, but I think if she could have seen the child and the child just looked like they were staring into the chicken coop, she possibly wouldn't have like bolted or run.
She called to her.
Yeah, and nothing happened. Yeah.
So the chicken coop gate was a loop top fence, which is similar to a lot of pool fencing you see around, but it was shorter than standard pool fencing. So if you don't know what loop top fence is, it's pretty common in Australia. They're fencing with metal bars and then sort of the top kind of loops around. You see it a lot.
Yeah.
It's in a lot of playgrounds.
So that you don't have any
there's no sharp
pointy uppy
points.
bits.
Yeah, but also makes it harder to climb over.
Yeah, correct. So the chronology establishes that Ebony was last accounted for at 11:32 a.m. and then was found at 11:41 a.m. So she was unaccounted for and unsupervised for just under 10 minutes.
And can I double check, was there any contention around that 10:32 head count? Yeah, okay. Because I was like, I'm sure it would be very easy to accidentally miscount or whatever. But you're saying no, like that there's no issue with that bit.
No, there's not. And she was last definitively seen at 11:22 a.m., which is again
20 minutes anyway. Yeah, okay.
Look, it's 20 minutes, not a long time. 10 minutes, even less.
Yeah.
This is what I could understand would make people very nervous.
Yes. Yeah, because that's quite a short
It's not
amount of
a
time.
long amount of time for things to go wrong. So when Miss H had found Ebony, she obviously panicked and she ran Ebony to the office in her arms where the childcare centre director was sitting at her desk. Miss H initially thought that Ebony was choking. At this point, Ebony was completely limp and pale. The centre director performed back blows because she also thought she might be choking. And then she ran out of the office, the centre director ran out of the office with Ebony and took her across the road to the local surgery at 11:42 a.m, so a minute later.
Oh, okay. I was like, where are you running with this child? But you're taking it to
Literally,
a doctor.
and remember, this is like a rural country town.
Yeah.
And the surgery is literally right across the road. So it's like probably quicker.
Yes.
I think the coroner sort of was like, I understand, and didn't hold this against any of the people that like, I understand you did that before you called 000 because it was just quicker to get her across to medical attention across the road.
Yeah, that's fair.
So at 11:44 a.m., so 2 minutes later, the first 000 call was made by a childcare staff member, and a second call was made at 11:47 a.m. by a surgery staff member. The ambulance was dispatched at 11:47 and arrived at the surgery by 12:08 p.m. The doctor on duty at the surgery was attending a patient when Ebony was brought in. So again, it's a rural town. There's only one doctor.
Yeah.
But he immediately went to her and noticed her face and lips were blue, that she was floppy, and she had no heart rate. He commenced CPR and asked his staff to call an ambulance. Ebony was also hooked up to a defibrillator, and it advised no shock on multiple occasions, meaning that there was no pulse present. I'm assuming everyone knows how I mean, you two know how they work, but I don't know if like Georgie wanted to provide an explanation of that.
A lot of the smarter technology defibrillators now have automatic sensors in them to make it easier.
Yeah.
So that you don't need to have as high a level of training, because like medical officers often have advanced life support, but where you then look at what the defibrillator says and you make the judgment call as to whether to shock or not. A lot of the automated defibrillators now will try to determine that based on
the
what it sees
or activity that's coming through.
Yeah, what it sees, and it does that reading for you, and so it can then say, yes, this is a shockable or non-shockable rhythm.
Yeah,
generally, most of the ones that you see in public are going to be those ones that tell you whether to shock or not to shock.
Yeah,
and you can't shock if there's no rhythm.
Pulse or rhythm.
So, is that correct?
If they're in like, what is it, VFib?
Pulseless electrical activity is not a shockable rhythm because the shock is a way to change the pattern of the electrical activity. So you need to be in the right type of heart electrical activity, such as, you said VFib, so ventricular fibrillation is a shockable rhythm. So there's different types of rhythms that have evidence behind the shocking or not shocking.
Yep.
And so, pulseless electrical activity is essentially like your heart's sort of doing something, but not enough to sustain life.
Right.
And is not shockable because you're not then jump starting the heart back into the rhythm that you need it to be in.
And I'm assuming defibrillation works by, sending electrical activity into the body. And if it's like there's no electrical rhythm in the body it's like a circuit, right? Like an electrical circuit. There needs to be something there to complete the circuit. And if there's nothing there,
it's not going to do anything.
It's not going to work.
And so then it just becomes unsafe to those around that it's not worth doing.
Which is why they would bring that system into place of no shock, because otherwise, if you could just shock when there was no pulse and there was no risk to anyone outside, wouldn't that be better? But if it does create risk for other people, then I understand why that warning has been introduced. And you wouldn't understand how that works if you weren't trained. And the whole point of these mobile defibrillators anyway, I know this wasn't the case here, but is so that people who are untrained
can use them.
Yeah. So once the ambulance arrived, they took over the CPR treatment. There was no obvious trauma identified. A glucose check was conducted and an endotracheal tube was inserted to assist with breathing. When inserting the ET tube, the paramedic had a clear view of Ebony's airway and vocal cords and did not see anything to indicate choking.
Okay.
Can I give you my theory of what happened?
Don't ruin it.
Okay.
No, I want to hear it.
In my head.
What is it?
I reckon she got bitten by a snake. Maybe. Chickens were getting really antsy in the chicken coop that morning, which means there was a predator in there.
Right.
Then she's going and standing next to the chicken coop
and
maybe being like, oh, look, there's a snake in the chicken coop. And then the snake comes along and bites her. That's my theory.
Good theory.
I just assumed it was like external asphyxiation, but then as in she got her head caught in something.
Okay. Also good theory.
You haven't said that the childcare worker found her in any way that indicates that. Yeah.
We'll find out because the coroner does make a conclusion on the findings.
Ooh.
Yeah, because I was going to say, we're just never going to find out.
No, there is a finding made. So adrenaline was administered at about 12:24 p.m. and it was observed that Ebony's CO2 levels were increasing and that there was a return of spontaneous circulation. The ambulance then departed the surgery with Ebony at 12:26, so 2 minutes later.
Wow, what a whirlwind.
Just
But also-
wild. And I just think
50
about like
minutes.
the other children at the centre and like
That are now also probably unsupervised in the same
they would
sense.
have less supervision than
Yeah.
they did, 100%. Like
Yeah.
there'd probably only be like one
person looking after
them.
all of them.
Yeah.
And they'd be picking up on all of that
Yeah.
panic.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
fear
And then
that
trying
was
to have their
happening.
lunch.
Yeah.
I'm trying to have their lunch. There'll probably be a few of them and it's like, I'm eating. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Probably.
But yeah, I assume it would have been like, okay, everyone sits here. I see everybody and there's one person looking after everybody while the other three are away.
Yeah.
And that just makes it so much harder for everyone.
And even like the doctor in their surgery, all
you
of a
imagine
sudden
just-
in the middle
yeah.
of the day, there's like this very
Panic.
ill child that
Yeah.
you then need to help with, but for only a period of half
10
an
minutes,
hour.
yeah.
Yeah.
Less than half an hour.
Yeah.
And then the ambulance takes them and you're just like,
Do I go back to
now
my
what?
patient now?
Well, essentially, yes. And that's the problem because you're then like,
Full of adrenaline.
oh, yeah.
and where do you think your mind is?
Not with your patient.
Yeah. And so it's so
Yeah.
hard to flick that switch back to, I've just got to like look after a normal patient
Yeah,
now who's
he's
come
a
with like a
normal
sore
GP.
finger.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
person needs a script.
Yeah. It's, yeah.
Very tricky. So Ebony's mother was informed of the emergency and had arrived at the surgery by 12 p.m. She travelled in the ambulance with Ebony and a police officer drove her car to the hospital, which
Oh,
I thought
that's
was a
good.
nice little detail
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
added. Because, yeah, you don't think of things like that.
Often it doesn't get taken care of. And then that
Yeah.
poor person is left with, like a parking fine and stuff like that.
Yeah. Or even just their car in a completely different location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they have to,
Figure out how to
Get
get there.
yeah.
Which I think this sort of shows the lovely sentiment of like local communities and smaller
Absolutely,
communities where the
yeah.
police officer, she was probably just like, here are my keys.
Yeah.
And the copper was just like, okay, I'll drive it
Yeah.
and make sure everything's taken care of you. for
Hopefully
you.
it was like just not like a even more of a nice of like the cop just being like, hand me your keys, I'll bring your car.
Or that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she might not have been
She
thinking
pro-
about that.
actually, you're right.
Yeah.
She probably wasn't thinking of that. So Ebony was taken to the Royal Darwin Hospital and arrived at about 12:51 p.m. She was admitted to the emergency department and then transferred directly to the intensive care unit where she was intubated. During this process, the possibility of an airway obstruction was excluded.
Okay. It's definitely not choking.
No. So Ebony died in the ICU on the evening of the 2nd of September 2023. The coroner's report didn't actually cover anything between the point where she was checked into ICU and when she died, but I think we can just infer.
She
She
had
just didn't recover.
well, I was gonna say, she had a hypoxic brain injury from
Yes.
I mean, they were administering CPR and she had pulses, electrical activity, but they didn't really when the childcare worker found her, was she completely unconscious, not responding, not
Yes.
breathing? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think there was commentary in the coroner's report that like she was down for a very long time and
Yeah.
generally they would consider whether or not to perform CPR and things at those points, but because it was
Right.
such a young child,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it was decided that all measures should be used.
And so presumably once she was in ICU, there was sort of that discussion around
Then they can take a minute to think about it and
yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about it.
And
And it
if
took
she-
a couple of days.
and if she
Yeah.
weren't ventilated, then she was not going to survive.
Mm.
Yeah.
So during the emergency, Miss Kay conducted a quick examination of the area where Ebony had been found to look for hazards such as snakes and spiders. She saw a plastic yellow, red and blue tricycle tipped on its side near the chicken coop gate, and she picked it up and checked for hazards like spiders within the trike, but she found nothing. The sergeant from the local police station attended the scene during the emergency. He then attended the childcare centre and was shown where Ebony was found and given a description of what had occurred. The sergeant observed the tricycle and checked the fence with his hands to check whether the fence had somehow become electrified.
Oh, yeah.
It was not. So he stepped over the fence to check for snakes, but he also didn't find anything.
Mm-hmm.
He then took photos of the area for evidence.
Also, checking the fence with your hands to see if it's electrified.
I mean, how
Look.
electrified do electrified fences get, though?
I don't know.
Well, it
Well, I
depends
guess,
what's
I mean, and-
electrifying it.
Yeah, and I was going to say.
Probably
and if we're
could-
concerned that it has killed a child.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but sometimes you don't think,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
You're just like,
yeah.
what could have happened?
Yep.
Is it electric? So the sergeant's theory was that Ebony was possibly trying to get over the gate by standing on the tricycle, which may have rolled out from underneath her while she was leaning over the gate. This may have caused her to drop and possibly wedging her head and jaw between the loops on the top of the gate, putting pressure on her neck and causing her to become unconscious.
Okay. Yep.
You got it.
Winner.
The chickens being
Worst.
antsy was a red herring.
It was, well, she was going to because she'd heard them earlier in the day,
Yeah.
causing a bit of commotion, so it had interests her.
Yep.
And so she'd gone over and, tried to see what was going on.
Winner of the worst game ever.
Yeah. Yes.
Not a good game, but you did win.
Okay.
The gate measured 80 centimetres from the ground to the horizontal bar and 90 centimetres from the ground to the top of the loop, so that's not very tall.
No. And how tall was Ebony? Do we
90
know?
centimetres, so same
Yeah,
height.
okay.
There was approximately 9 centimetres between each loop. The gate, as I said, was at the end of a pathway behind the island shed and was known as a supervision blind spot in the Green Ants playground. Educators could not see the gate from the playground unless they were situated near the gate itself.
Okay.
It was established that the shed had been in place for at least the last 10 years, as had the chicken coop and the chicken coop gate. So it was something that had been around for a long time.
Yeah.
So the original centre director, the director before the director who was in charge at the time of Ebony's death, said that the area near the chicken coop was a concern for hazards such as snakes and leaf matter. So to stop children from accessing the hazardous area, in April 2022, the chicken coop fence was moved slightly forward to the location that it was in August 2023. So this effectively decreased the size of the playground and increased the size of the chicken coop. So basically all those hazardous areas they just put in the chicken coop.
Yeah.
Side. And all
Nice.
they're like the chickens can deal
Yeah.
with the snakes. And,
I mean, fair.
it's fair. So an autopsy was performed and Ebony's height was recorded as 90 centimetres, which was the same height as to the top of the loop. Based on the information known to the forensic pathologist at the time, Ebony's cause of death was ruled as undetermined. This determination was peer-reviewed before being made. The autopsy eliminated several possible causes of death. There were no congenital abnormalities, no evidence of cardiac abnormality, no evidence of infection or sepsis, and no signs of trauma, anaphylaxis, or snakebite. Via genetic testing, cardiac arrhythmia and seizure activity were also excluded. No choking object was found on autopsy either.
Yep.
The forensic pathologist considered that Ebony was found upright but floppy, so she could not have been standing on her own, so she must have been held up by something.
Yeah.
It was a pathologist's opinion that Ebony had suffered a hypoxic brain injury caused by a compression to her neck, noting the tissues in a child's neck are very soft and pliable, but there was no bruising to Ebony's neck at
interesting.
autopsy.
Because it essentially happened so quickly, but potentially in like
Yeah.
a soft enough manner that it didn't actually cause like bruising is going to be blood vessels that are obstructed or broken or whatever. And maybe it happened so gently that it didn't cause enough and in such a quick period of time.
Yeah, don't know, but it makes it very hard for the forensic pathologist to actually work out what's going on.
Yeah.
So the opinions of multiple experts were sought at the inquest, and they agreed that it was most likely that Ebony had suffered hypoxic brain injury caused by pressure to her neck. During the course of the inquest, it was also learned that the nesting boxes and the chicken feeders were located right behind the island's shed, so to the immediate left of the gate. Ebony's mother had said that in the weeks before her death, they had been looking after the neighbours' chickens and going and collecting the eggs from the chicken baskets at the neighbour's property. So the coroner found it was possible that Ebony was trying to look at the nesting boxes
Yep.
because she
wanted to collect the
wanted
eggs.
to collect the
Yeah.
eggs. And as she was the same height as the gate, she needed extra height to be able to actually see over the top of the
Yeah.
gate because she would have just sort of seen gate. So it's likely that she went and got the tricycle, stood on the tricycle to gain the extra height, where she lost her footing, fell, and her neck became stuck between the fencing. It was likely that Miss H, who found Ebony, did not actually find her standing, but she would have been upright.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was just going to ask of like, were her feet on the floor? And it's like, yes, but not quite enough to like actually sustain her or keep her
Weight.
upright. Like,
Yeah.
as in she wasn't holding her own weight.
No.
Yeah.
But it would have
Yeah.
looked like from a distance maybe
Yeah.
that she was
And maybe
actually
like just
standing.
with the panic and stuff,
you
she didn't
didn't actually
remember the
notice.
part that where
Yeah.
her head was actually in
stuck.
the-
Yeah.
Yeah.
From this evidence, the coroner found that Ebony's cause of death was hypoxic brain injury caused by compression of the neck. So that is what happened to Ebony. Of course, there was a lot of questions around this one. So first of all, let's take a look at the regulation of childcare centres in the Northern Territory. So the National Quality Framework commenced in 2012 following an agreement amongst all Australian jurisdictions to implement a national approach to regulate and improve the quality of early childhood education and care centres. Not something we hear very often of
That's so
jurisdictions
surprising.
agreeing and being like, let's come up with a national framework of how this should be
Yes.
regulated.
I agree, but then I get really frustrated because like even though they then create a national one, it's then on each state to implement it. And then they can then make their own minor changes to it. And that still
Correct.
breaks me because then you end up with like it'll fracture over time, but fine.
yeah. I think it helps with those jurisdictions that maybe don't have as large a population and wouldn't develop like
Yeah.
such a high or stringent framework themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there are a number of laws and regulations under this framework, as well as a national body, which is the Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority, which guides the implementation of the framework and works with the relevant regulatory bodies. In the NT, Quality Education and Care Northern Territory is the regulatory authority in that territory. I just refer to them as the regulator or the regulatory body because
Yeah,
the
that's
acronym for
easier.
that isn't anything you can actually say. And otherwise it's just a mouthful to keep on
They
repeating.
didn't design the regulator around the acronym that would occur.
No, they didn't. It's
Missed
like,
opportunity.
Yeah.
so the regulator's responsibilities include the administration of the national framework, including by conducting compliance checks and enforcement actions, assessments and ratings. So it conducts formal assessment and rating visits of childcare centres and evaluates them against the 7 quality areas of the National Quality Standards, which, in case you're interested, are educational program and practice, children's health and safety. I find it interesting that the education comes before the health and safety.
Let's just say they weren't ordered in
Yeah.
order of priority.
As I was writing this down, I was like, that seems a little weird.
But I guess,
They are education centres.
yeah, the
Yeah.
primary purpose of it is to educate, right?
Yeah,
So I guess they're trying to make sure that
that is the primary purpose.
yeah.
Physical environment, staffing arrangements, relationships with children, collaborative partnerships with families and communities, and governance and leadership. The regulator also receives and investigates complaints, provides support and guidance to centres and families, promotes continuous quality improvement, and collects data and reports on the administration of the national framework. Got a fair few responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it doesn't say how staffed the regulator is, but I'm sure on the NT, not very.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So to then maintain all of those responsibilities is going to be challenging.
Yeah. So the relevant childcare centre is a private, not-for-profit, community-managed childcare provider and has been approved provider under the national law since the 6th of March 2012. So basically since the framework came into place.
Well, I was going to say, was it actually established prior to that? And it's only now that the national
Yeah.
framework. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. It's not
and
like
so
they-
then it's had to go through all the approval processes for the
Yeah.
national framework in 2012. So under the law, where an approved provider is an organisation, each person with management or control of the service must be deemed a fit and proper person under the law, and each approved provider must have at least one nominated person. The nominated supervisor responsible for the day-to-day operation of the service acts on behalf of the approved provider to ensure compliance with the national law. So basically saying each childcare centre needs to have a nominated person, even if it is a company, in order to say that.
Yeah, you need someone
Yeah.
to be accountable.
Correct. So on the 31st of August 2023, so the day of the incidents, the centre had 4 nominated persons responsible for its management and control. In 2012, the centre participated in the accreditation process under the National Quality Framework, which included a rating visit by the NT regulator, which occurred on the 2nd of November 2012 and the 4th of December 2012. Following this assessment, assessments were performed on a semi-regular basis in 2015, 2018 and 2020.
That seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah. In 2020, the centre was assessed as meeting all 7 quality areas under the framework, and it retained that rating as at the 31st of August 2023. So you retain your rating from the last assessment until your next assessment.
And presumably the next one was coming
up soon.
Soonish.
Yeah, because it seems to be every 2 to 3 years that they do them. So at this time, so the time of the 2020 inspection, the island shed and chicken coop gate remained in situ. The fence had moved a little bit in 2022, but that hadn't changed where the island shed or the chicken coop gate was. In the 2020 assessment, there was nothing to indicate that the NT regulator had any concerns around the centre meeting the criteria, including around the physical environment and supervision practices, noting the blind spots around the chicken coop. On the 8th of July 2022, there was a monitoring and compliance report made to the regulator regarding an incident at the centre where a child had tripped while running into a water fountain.
This sounds like children.
Yep. Okay. The child did receive injury. Like, I think they cut open something in their mouth and,
okay, yep.
You know.
Because they tripped and fell on their face like children do.
But, like, I cannot tell you how many children I have seen like that.
Yeah.
That is what happens
they are
to children.
Yes.
No matter whether they're supervised in a daycare or supervised by their parent at home or in the street.
So following a triage process by the regulator, the incident was deemed low risk, and monitoring and compliance visit was conducted on the 4th of October 2022 to observe the area. During this assessment, the physical environment was assessed as compliant.
Yeah, okay. So again, an accident happened.
And nothing. Nothing came of it. Then on the 21st of February 2023, there was an incident at the centre where a child accessed an open gate during an excursion, exited the centre, and was later located in the car park.
Oops. That's not where you want them to be.
That's not ideal.
No. The incident was reported to the regulator as it was required to be. And through the triage process, the incident again was deemed low risk. However, an investigation was conducted.
Yep.
On the 8th of May 2023, authorised officers attended the centre and conducted interviews with relevant staff and viewed the areas of the incident. No further inspections around the rest of the property were conducted at that time because it just wasn't relevant.
And these reports, were they being made to the regulator by the daycare anyway?
Mandatory self-reporting. Yeah, they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, you say mandatory self-reports, but like...
Yeah. A child falls over, like, it's probably because he had to receive medical attention for it, like, outside of the...
But the, like, being found in the car park, that would have been
relatively
easy to have elected to not report. You know what I mean?
And that's arguably worse than the trip and fall because it's a supervision issue.
Well, and it's a child getting outside of the centre where they could have been more injured or had other risks to them.
Yes.
But again, like, at least this daycare is doing the right thing and reporting that. So to me, that all sounds actually reassuring.
Yeah. The outcome of the investigation was that the centre was found to have breached the framework, including for inadequate supervision and failure to protect children from hazards. From that finding, the centre was required to reflect on active supervision practices and consider precautions necessary to protect the safety of children and implement regular checks of the outdoor area to ensure safety. On the 19th of June 2023, a nominated supervisor submitted a response to the regulator attaching documents to demonstrate the implementation of the required actions. So this included an updated internal policy where staff were required to sign that policy to show that they had read and understood the policy. And it's all about, supervisor checks and things like that. So on the 31st of August 2023, all but one of the educators who were on duty that morning had signed the policy. So they'd all sort of read it except for one of them. So on the 30th of August 2023, so the day before the incident, the centre had a staff meeting in which the importance of supervision was discussed. The minutes of the meeting record that all educators read through the supervision procedure and active supervision strategies. They also marked on a supervision map the best areas for supervisors to be supervising in the yards and marked high-risk areas that should be supervised at all time. The blind spot behind the island shed was identified by educators as high risk, where supervision is always required. 5 high-risk areas were identified in the yard, noting that only 3 or 4 educators supervise in the area at any given time.
Yeah.
So there's more
Okay.
blind spots than there are people to
Yep.
actually cover the blind spots. None of the supervisors who are responsible for Ebony on the 31st of August were present at the meeting the day before, though.
Oh, that's
Oh,
annoying.
yeah.
Okay. I was
But
going to
it-
be like, oh, okay, cool, sweet. So, like,
You literally marked out that this is a
Yeah.
hazardous spot, and then you didn't.
do anything.
But that said, one of them was standing at that chicken coop gate
She-
for
I-
a period of
Yes,
time.
she, I believe, was the one who then went and organised lunch.
Yeah.
So she walked off, and then no one.
the
yeah,
high
no
risk
one
area
took that
stopped.
spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they also mentioned in the report that there was no children around at that time. So they were like, well, there's no children around this area at that time. So there's no point, which is, you know, children can move.
Yes.
But I guess at that point, it was reasonable to no longer supervise there
Yes.
because they
Yep,
weren't
'cause there was no one there.
supervising. Yeah.
Yeah, they were just standing there and not looking at
Yeah.
any children. So there was a supervision map in place at the time of Ebony's accident because obviously, well,
Because it was done the day before.
day before, but there was
Yeah.
one prior to that as well.
Yeah.
And that early one had also identified that spot as an area of high risk. So even though those 3 or 4 individuals weren't there on the day before, like there was another map in place and
Yeah.
And it was
they
known
would
by
have been
them.
aware.
yeah, and it was known by them that it was a high risk area. The coroner concluded that despite the identification of the area as being high risk and the implementation of supervision strategies, including that the supervisors should be aware of where all children are at all times, there was a lapse of supervision which led to this incident. I don't think that's very controversial.
Yeah.
Immediately after Ebony's death, the centre installed a new gate at the island shed, which completely restricted access to the area and to the area where the actual chicken coop gate was.
Yeah, I was thinking that would be an easy way to do it. Like just put another
Yeah,
gate.
a gate for the gate.
Yeah.
And then shortly after, the island shed and chicken coop fence were removed completely.
Oh,
the chickens.
yeah, that would have been such a fun activity for the kids.
I don't know if they were moved somewhere else. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they
okay, but-
replaced the
yeah,
gate.
okay.
Like got rid
Yeah.
of the shed, didn't replace it, but then replaced the
Gate
the
and
gate
whatever.
and the
Yeah.
fence.
Maybe. So let's have a look at the regulation of fencing in childcare centres.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's very specific.
And
yeah,
so
makes sense.
You said it was a loop top, but was it transparent? Because you said she was trying to, the assumption is she was trying to see. But in my mind, it was bars that she could have seen through anyway.
Yeah, I mean, she could have. But
Yeah, but she may have been
just
trying to
climbed
get
up to get
the
like
height
to see.
as well if she's trying to see over
Yeah.
into the nesting
And
box.
she could have
maybe.
been trying to
Yeah.
climb into
Yeah.
the chill.
So potentially she could see through it.
Yeah.
And then she was just
She would have
climbing
been
up
able to
it
see
as
through it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a wooden paneling fence
No,
that's
no.
obstructing
No.
vision in between. Yeah, cool.
She could see through it.
I need this for my own visual understanding.
Visualisation.
Yeah.
So fencing in childcare centres must comply with the National Regulation 104, which specifies that outdoor spaces used by children are to be enclosed by a fence or barrier of the height and design that children of preschool age or under cannot go over, through, or under.
I mean, technically she couldn't.
No, she couldn't, and that's why she got in this situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she tried
Yeah.
and it didn't work. So an expert provided a report to the coroner about the risks associated with playground fencing in childcare centres. In that report, the expert was of the opinion that National Regulation 104 is inadequate because it fails to address the risk of entrapment or strangulation on fences, and it provides no guidance as to heights or designs which might meet the standards. So it doesn't give like specifications,
Yep.
it just says
Make sure they can't.
they can't exactly.
Yeah. Which
Whereas
is
actually-
unlike pool fencing, at least in Queensland, those laws tell you
Correct.
how tall it needs to be, I think it even says what the width of the
it does.
And like how
bars needs to
far
be-
away it needs to be from
The
certain things.
pool.
Because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
now when they're retrofitting them, if you've got some sort of table or pergola or whatever
raised
nearby,
garden bed. Yeah.
yeah, you then have to then add an additional section on
Yep.
where
Mhm.
it would no longer meet the height requirement, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And just as you said, the expert's opinion was that this National Regulation 104, which applied to private premises, was less rigorous than the Australian standard for playground, like public
Right.
fencing.
Yeah,
So
okay.
the Australian standard for playground fencing was the same as the pool safety fencing standards. So it had detailed diagrams of specifications for non-climbable zones, fence heights, gaps, footholds, gate closing mechanisms, and latches. So it has all the specifications
Yeah.
for all of that for the
Yeah.
public
Stuff.
playgrounds, but that's not
Right.
the same regulations as the private
Yeah.
premises. That said, in the Australian standards, there were no design requirements that address snag or neck entrapment hazards for fencing.
Gotcha.
So that's not a specific thing that's actually noted in the standards.
Which I kind of find interesting though, because a lot of private residences now, like if you have stairs down off a balcony, you've got to have a specific width of paneling down those from an entrapment perspective for children's size of heads.
Yes.
So so like if you've got a railing down your stairs, it can't be too wide because a kid's head could go through it.
Yep.
I think I read somewhere that was the case with like pool fencing and stuff, and these playground equipment ones, that the width between the bars has to be like less than 8 centimeters or something.
Yeah, so that you can't get a head.
So you can't get a head through. But I think when the expert sort of wrote this report, it was more about like the top
of the fencing as the entrapment, rather than between the panels.
Bars.
Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying then.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I'm saying loop style fencing, hopefully you'll understand what I'm saying, and you will see it around the play. Like, it is very, very common.
Like a U-bend at the top of the bars.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's very common in children's playgrounds, although in recent years it has become more recognised as having this potential hanging risk for children. So it's increasingly being replaced with flat top fences instead. So they're just the bars that just go completely flat at the top. So there's no spikes, no loops.
Yeah, okay.
No anything.
It's got some sort of horizontal beam across the top to protect from any open railings.
But otherwise it's just a railing going from top to bottom, and then there's a horizontal bar at the top, and that's becoming more and more common. Not something I've really looked out for, but I probably will now. Looking out for public fencing to see what it looks like. So in terms of the institutional response, following this incident, the NT regulator immediately satisfied itself that access to the location of the chicken coop fence was restricted by the installation of that new fence. In those circumstances, the regulator waited until police investigations were completed, and then it conducted a compliance and monitoring review of the centre on the 5th of October 2023, which resulted in the service of a non-compliance notice which identified actions in rectifications to be taken. Also undertook an assessment and rating review of the centre on the 12th and 13th of November 2024, which is more than 12 months later. During this assessment, the centre's rating was downgraded from meeting the standards to working towards the standards, and the maximum capacity for the centre was reduced from 116 to 72 children.
Okay, that's a significant reduction.
It is.
Yeah, wow.
Was that at a point where it meant children couldn't attend? Or was their clientele not large enough for that to actually make a difference to them day to day?
Not sure. But in any case, it was reduced. And like, you also don't know if maybe people pulled their children.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, true.
Childcare centre.
After hearing that.
Yeah. Although, as I said, it's a rural town, so I don't know how many other options.
Yeah, that was my question of like, if it's downgraded, does that actually mean that some people are without childcare?
So there was also an unannounced compliance check on the 10th of January 2025, in which further non-compliance issues were identified, but they didn't go into what those were.
Yeah, okay.
So across the sector as a whole, the regulator advised that it had increased its activities in respect of all service providers with the goal of ensuring high standards of safety and quality are maintained in care centres, including by offering educational sessions on request, engaging in monthly communications on sector obligations through emails, letters and general updates to childcare centres, and providing daily education support through a dedicated phone line and email, ensuring that approved providers can access regulatory guidance when they need it. The regulator advised that commencing in February 2025, it would conduct a supervision audit across all approved services in the NT, including a review of service providers' premises and environment, identification of supervision blind spots and consideration of management of those blind spots, a consideration of each service's general risk management strategies, and support for service providers to understand their obligations with respect to adequate supervision at all times.
It sounds like this is a really proactive, positive way of managing it rather than reactive, negative, authoritarian way of managing it, which sounds really nice.
It sounded like, the regulator sort of stepped up and was like, okay,
Yeah, how do we improve this?
How do we improve
What can we
things
do?
rather than like pointing the finger
Yeah.
at anyone else? They were just sort of like, okay, we're the regulator. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. How can we do this? Let's implement these actions.
Yeah.
And it's hard. They're children and the supervisors are human and sometimes they've got 20 things that they're juggling. And it's the same with parents, right? Like,
And you never, like, sometimes you can't imagine the things that kids would do. Like, they just think of things. Where did that idea come from?
Yeah.
An adult would never
like,
think
that's,
to
like,
do that because we're taller and whatever.
Well, and also kids are so fiercely independent sometimes where it's like, if she just asked one of the educators to help her, then she probably would have got the hand up that she wanted, but supervised so that it was done safely.
Yeah.
And that's not any fault of her own. That's called being a toddler.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
And also, like, you forget how, like, smart they are.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
If she was,
Problem
like,
solving.
if she did have this plan and, like, problem solve and be like, I want to do this. So to do that, I'm going to grab this and I'm going to step on it. Like,
yeah, and then she just doesn't have the risk management.
she doesn't have the, she doesn't
thinking.
understand the consequences, which, you know, you don't. A lot of, you know, young adults and adults don't. Consequences.
A 2-year-old definitely doesn't.
So a 2-year-old does, so we cannot fault her for that. I just was like, oh, that's really quite an intelligent, like, she's put a plan in place.
To achieve
her goal.
And the foreseeability. You can foresee that a kid's going to climb against a fence. I think that's not an unforeseeable action. But realizing the potential for her to have gotten stuck in such a manner, I think would have been more hard to foresee at that point in time, maybe. And that maybe this is becoming more obvious now. I mean, it's not that long ago, but yeah, fencing design and stuff is definitely something that's being considered more and more. Yeah,
quite a lot.
But again, I feel like most of the time it's fencing design around keeping people out. It's less about the safety of the structure itself.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, you don't see, obviously when we were kids, there were a lot of those, like, the same type of fencing as this loop top, but with the, like, actual little spikes on the tops. And you're like, yeah, I can see how, you know, kids trying to climb over that.
It's not ideal.
Was an issue, and you don't really see those much anymore, except for, like, maybe on people's private properties
when they're older and they haven't been updated yet.
Yeah, correct. But you don't see those around a lot, so it'll be interesting to keep an eye out on the loop top fencing and because I'm pretty sure, like, at my primary school and stuff, we would have had the loop tops.
Oh, I'm sure they're present at playgrounds and everything.
Yeah,
or they were.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see whether that does start getting more and more phased out as these issues become more and more well known.
I think there's different building materials now that help as well, though. Like, there's a lot more, like, aluminium style fences that have almost like wood look like paneling rather than thin bars and stuff. That's going to help.
Or even just glass.
Yeah,
people
I just
have
think
got glass panel
in
pool fences.
Public space is less.
It's
less convenient.
As at the date of the coroner's report, which I think was the 25th of October 2025, from memory, all service providers had been requested to identify and document, including with photographs, any blind spots at their locations, including how those blind spots are managed in terms of supervision. The coroner was advised that most service providers do have blind spots and that the extent to which those blind spots create risk and how those risks are managed on a case-by-case basis. So obviously there are sometimes blind spots, but there's not really any risk around the blind spot. It could just be
like a dead end.
But
there's
dead end
nothing,
of something.
There's no fence,
but also,
there's
to
no
be
anything.
fair, there was, all it really was a gate.
Yeah, at this one. But like, yeah, unless you literally have like an open flat ground with nothing.
Yeah.
Which is
you're
not
gonna have
very
blind spots. It's not enticing for the children to play
playground.
Yeah.
Yeah, why wouldn't you just fence that section off?
Yeah.
So in regards to supervision, it was noted that the policy and strategy maps used by the centre were adequate, but were not adequately followed.
Yeah, fair.
In particular, there was a failure by the educators to do a yard check when the children transitioned to lunch. But it was noted that in the strategy for yard checks for the centre, yard checks during transitions were not specifically included in that policy. So they're like, maybe pop that in that, you know, you should be doing actual physical yard checks after children have transitioned out of the yard to make sure none of them have been left behind.
Yeah, the person with the last little group of kids to go and wash their hands. I don't know whether they could do a really quick
I don't know,
sweep,
because then are they able to like move the kids? Or it's tricky.
But it also sounds like they did an immediate head count once they got all of the children transitioned. So like
they just didn't do a sweep of the yard.
Yeah, but it's like one of those things of like they were attempting to check that they had
everyone, and then that's when they found. Yeah,
but then
exactly.
but they didn't.
But the problem is there's a gap of time between,
in between
the transition and then them doing the head count and realizing someone had been missing. That was the ultimate issue, which you can see why it wasn't done.
Yeah.
But you can also see why learning from
help.
this, maybe it should be something that's implemented. And the regulator did admit that these sort of post-transition yard checks had not been previously identified as a shortfall in the centre's strategy or anything like that. So the regulator was like, they didn't do it, but we didn't flag that it was a problem.
Yeah. They should have been doing it.
So there was no real chance for them to rectify it because if you don't know it's an issue, then why are you going to take any action? So the coroner's findings were that Ebony had died because her neck had become trapped between the loops of a loop-top gate, causing a hypoxic brain injury. The coroner found that the main factors that contributed to Ebony's death were the presence of the low loop-style gate in the childcare centre playground. The style of fencing is permitted by the relevant regulations despite their identified hazards. The risk posed by the gate were not identified by the centre, the educators on duty, or the regulator. The gate was located in a supervision blind spot. The extent of the risk of the blind spot was not appreciated by the centre or the educators and was not adequately addressed by the centre or the regulator. The active supervision strategies of the centre failed. Ebony was unaccounted for nearly 10 minutes, meaning that there was inadequate supervision of the children in the playground, which provided an opportunity for Ebony to be in the blind spot for some time without being noticed. And when the children transitioned from the playground to lunch, there was no yard check to ensure no child was left behind. This type of check was lacking from the supervision strategies of the centre and was not identified by the regulator. The coroner made the following recommendations. First off, that the regulator take all necessary steps to advocate for the strengthening of the fencing standard in the National Quality Framework so that fencing standards throughout childcare centres are upgraded. So basically asking the NT regulator to put up its hand and be like, for this whole National Quality Framework, this is something that we're...
Right. But in theory, all of the rest of the states should go along with
hopefully,
it, right?
like you wouldn't want, as a regulator, you wouldn't want this incident happening in your jurisdiction. So, anything you can do to prevent it.
It doesn't seem unreasonable.
I was about to say, it's not an unreasonable sort of change to make.
Yeah.
It was recommended that the regulator ensure that its authorised officers are aware of entrapment and strangulation risks arising from fencing and require authorised officers to take steps to identify those risks and ensure they're addressed when they carry out their functions and do their inspections at childcare centres. Another recommendation was that the regulator ensure that site visit documentation completed by its authorised officers includes a requirement to conduct fencing and blind spot inspections at regular intervals, and that the regulator maintain current photos of all inspected fences. It's also recommended that the regulator will develop and conduct a supervision audit across all childcare centres in the NT. And finally, that the NT government will undertake public awareness campaigns to alert the general public to the risks of loop-top and rod-topped fencing. So as I said, this coroner's report was handed down on the 25th of October 2025. So that's when the findings of her death were handed down, because as I said, it was previously undetermined of how the actual death had occurred. So following this inquest,
it
was determined that she actually had an accident, I guess, rather than like being a snake bite or something like that. It was an actual accident.
Yeah.
So in early November 2025, the NT Education Department charged the centre criminally and 3 of the supervisors with inadequately protecting children from harm and hazards.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that obviously occurred in November 2025. I couldn't find any news articles of any updates on that, so I would guess it's still pending.
Yeah.
But yes, so 3 individuals were actually charged criminally.
Wow. Does that feel harsh to you? Feels a bit harsh to me.
I don't know, because if I put myself in the spot of Ebony's parents, I would be like, I send my child to a childcare centre where I expect that my child will be supervised, and she wasn't, and she died. But also I get that these supervisors were following the procedures that they were told to follow.
But we also at the very beginning talked about like it happened so quickly that I can imagine that theoretically could happen within the care of
absolutely
anybody,
could.
even if it had been the parents. Do you know what I mean? And so then I struggle to be like, is it worth charging them because there wasn't obvious negligence around the supervision that they were providing? Because even the regulator said we hadn't even identified that maybe that check should have been done or updated, versus if it, you know, had been like a prolonged period of time that they had been not supervising children
or they didn't
adequately,
realize she was missing
for a prolonged period of time. Like, I just don't know what benefit it is charging them in that instance, where I think the company as a whole, maybe, because it's not unreasonable for the company to face some repercussion because harm happened.
And I should say, I think that at least one of the people charged was that authorized person.
Yeah, okay.
From the company, which is why that was sort of flagged.
Yeah, okay.
So,
okay.
yeah.
So I guess the authorized person, they're wholly responsible. It's like the CEO, right?
Yeah,
and therefore, you know, that could be. But in terms of the actual educators on the floor on the day, I don't feel as strongly about.
Yeah.
Do we know if the educators who were involved are some of the ones being charged?
Or is it just it's difficult because in the report their names are redacted to Miss P, Miss H.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously in the actual charges they do have their names, and yes.
Okay, it is.
They do.
They
the surnames match
okay.
the initial letter of their...
But I guess potentially they're being charged in relation to being the authorized person rather than in relation to
because remember there were like 4 authorized people.
Okay, well then
so it could be that as well.
Okay, then I find,
and it could be that they're different people with the same initial.
True, it's a small community, so they might actually be, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Family. Yeah.
So I can't connect the dots there. So you're right. It could be that they're just the authorized people for the centre.
Well, again, if that's the way that it is being charged, then I have no issue with that, because that's under the premise of them running a business rather than of them supervising the individual children.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And as running a business, they are responsible for the safety of children. I mean, that's
their legal obligation.
Exactly. Yes. And to ensure that they're caring for children in an environment that doesn't have those sorts of hazards in them. Whereas, you're right. It is difficult for their educators. It's tricky. Like, I think 10 minutes is a very short amount of time. Others who have children might disagree and say, I would...
2 minutes is too long.
Exactly. So
I don't think any parent ever could say that they've never left their child.
No.
For a period of time.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, obviously you put them to bed and in a cot or whatever, but like...
Yeah.
Children are exhausting, and
you need
get up to stuff before you even notice.
Yeah, and like you also need to live your life and like cook dinner and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it doesn't deter any parents out there from sending their children to childcare centres or anything like that.
For the most part, we hope that they're there trying to educate your children first and then keep them safe second.
Do both at the same time.
No, the laws.
The law was very clear, Alice. Education first, safety.
It was a law. It was a framework. The framework was very clear. Education first.
Safety second. None of this safety first stuff. Not when it comes to childcare.
No.
Anyway, thanks very much for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.